Hi everyone, welcome to what is hopefully going to be our final week of distance learning. Fingers crossed we'll be back on the 8th and everything will go according to plan. Now, I'm just going to talk you through what we're doing this week and then I'll get into our English lesson. I'm really excited about them this week. They are based on one of my favourite books and one of the units I really love teaching. As you can probably tell, I kind of love teaching all elements of English, but this is a particular favourite of mine. So, distance learning for this week. Maths, as normal, will be online and it will be live. The codes have been sent out to your parents by parent mail, so they should be there for you. Same one, Monday to Thursday, 9:15, normal time. English this week, I'll talk to you about in a second. We're going to be looking at it based on the Spiderwick Chronicles. Guided reading will be uploaded onto Seesaw daily. For foundation subjects, you've got music today, PSHE tomorrow, computing on Wednesday, and art, like normal, on Thursday. Friday is your screen-free day, as it has been for the past few weeks, and then next Monday we'll all be back in. So, let's get started. In English, we're going to be looking at the Spiderwick Chronicles. Now, the Spiderwick Chronicles you may or may not have heard of before. There's a film, there's a series of books, and there's also what's called the Field Guide. Now, the Field Guide is what we're going to be looking at in a bit. The film is based around this world full of wonderful creatures, full of sort of mystical beings that exist but can only be seen if you wear a special type of glass, essentially. And these creatures are from dragons to brownies to leprechauns and everything in between. Now, the book we're going to be studying, or we're going to be looking at this week, is called The Field Guide. Now, The Field Guide is basically Arthur Spiderwick, who is the main character of the story. It's where he made his notes about all of the different creatures that he discovered, a bit like a journal, a bit like an encyclopedia. And we're going to be using that this week to look at some of the creatures, and then the last lesson of the week, you're going to have a chance to design your own creature and write a little bit about them. Okay, now today we're going to focus on using subordinate clauses. Now, hopefully you can remember what a subordinate clause is, but I will recap it in a second. Essentially, it's a part of a sentence that doesn't make sense on its own and could be taken out of the sentence and the sentence would still make sense. So, before we get into that though, all that technical stuff, let's have a look at the book. Arthur Spiderwick's Field Guide. This is the front cover on the left, and you can see it's designed to be like a handwritten journal. And it's got a little warning tucked on the inside. The front cover says, "Warning, do not dare to read this book, for if you take one fateful look, you barter at your life's expense and face a deadly consequence." What do you think this message means? Why do you think it's on the front cover of the book? Well, normally I would take your opinions on this, but obviously I can't do that. It's because this is a guide that's not meant to be seen by anyone else. It tells of all the magical creatures in the world, and that's meant to be secret knowledge. So the fact that we are going to have a chance to read this is not meant to be a good thing. Now, before we look at the creature of the day for today, because there'll be a creature of the day for the next 3 days, I'm going to show you some of the pages from inside the book so you can see just how beautiful this book is and the detail that goes into it. I need to have a think about the handwriting, what words they use, some of the images, the fonts, and how it's laid out, because it's not the same as a normal book. So this is the first page, and this is the descriptive page. So each creature has a descriptive page, and it has an image page. Now, as you can see here from the descriptive page, just look, it's got loads of drawings in the background, hand-drawn. It's got little notes in the corners. This is about the manticore. Originally documented in Persia, the feared man-eating manticore or manticora has been sighted in places as varied as the jungles of Brazil and Indonesia, and more rarely the forests of North America and Europe. With the body of a lion and a tail of poisonous spines that some report indicate can be shot like arrows, a manticore is a lethal predator. I just love the way it uses language to describe these creatures, and I think the drawings are really, really nice. Then we move on, and this is what the picture page might look at. Different creature, this is the common house boggart. So we can see the drawing here, which I think is wonderful, and then around it little handwritten notes. holding a broken shard of glass. He is wearing a stolen pair of doll shoes because he's so small he can fit into them. Then we have pages like this. This is the wood elf, or the female wood elf. And again, you can see they've created this book almost as if his pages have been sort of stuck over the top of it. And then you've got the beautiful drawing here. And then we have an old world leprechaun. And again, this is one of the picture pages. Again, you can see the detail that goes into the drawing and the notes in the beautiful handwriting. And this sort of page is what we're going to ask for you to recreate later on in the week. And I'm going to sort of help you out with that, so don't worry too much. Okay, so going back to the main topic of today, we're looking at something called a subordinate clause. Now, the reason we're doing that is because today we're going to be focusing on a creature, and the description of the creature uses a lot of subordinate clauses. We're going to be focusing on a creature called the sprite. Now, a subordinate clause, well, a clause is a group of words that could be a sentence. That's literally what a clause means. It has a subject, so it's about something. It has a verb, what it does. Now, a clause is a clause and not a sentence when it joins with another clause to make a sentence. So, if the clause makes sense on its own, it is a sentence. It is a main clause. If the clause joins with another clause to make a sentence, then that clause is a subordinate clause. It doesn't make sense on its own. For example, here are two sentences. He did not hunt. It was raining. Both of those are main clauses because they make sense on their own. Something happens. It was raining. There you go, something's happened. He did not hunt. Something happened. But we can join them together. He did not hunt because it was raining. Now, by doing that, we have the two clauses joined with a connecting word, because. So we can join those two clauses together. Now, if you have a look at that sentence here, we now have what's called a main clause and a subordinate clause. So one part of this sentence is a main clause. The other part of the sentence is a subordinate clause. I want you to see if you can work out which is which. Now, the way you do that is ask yourself, could I take it out and the sentence would still make sense? Okay, so if we have a look here, let's get the pen. Because it was raining is our subordinate clause. He did not hunt makes sense on its own. Because it was raining doesn't make sense on its own. Because it was raining, what? What's happening? We don't know. Because it was raining. He did not hunt because it was raining. So because it was raining is the subordinate clause. It gives us extra information. Here we go. He did not hunt because it was raining. And as we just said, main clause is the main point of my sentence. The subordinate clause is the extra information that we don't need, but it's nice to have it in there. And the conjunction links them together. Now, in this one, the subordinate clause was at the end, but it doesn't have to be. It can go at the front. If it does that, it's called a, I'm hoping you're saying, fronted adverbial. As the sun was setting, the tiger stalked her prey. So, as the sun was setting is our subordinate clause. Why? Because it doesn't make sense on its own. As the sun was setting, yes, what? Nothing's happened there. The tiger stalked her prey, that is the main clause. We could just have that as a sentence on its own. The tiger stalked her prey. Fine, that makes sense. And there we are. If we put a subordinate clause at the beginning of the sentence, we use a comma, which you know, because a fronted adverbial has a comma after it. A subordinate clause could also be put in the middle of a sentence, and you might know this as parenthesis, i.e. extra detail. The tiger who was ravenous, stalked her prey. Now we've got two parts here. We've got the tiger stalked her prey. That makes sense on its own. Who was ravenous is the subordinate clause, because we can get rid of it and the sentence will still make sense. Main clause, subordinate clause. We can get rid of it. Imagine if we cross this out here. The tiger stalked her prey. Still makes sense. Now, we are going to be having a look at the sprites today. Now, there are many different types of sprites. If we have a look here, we have different colours, different heights, different sizes, different appearances. What I want you to do is just to have a think, what words could you use to describe the different sprites? So just pause the video for a second and have a think, please. Okay, so if we have a look at any of them, I could use the word majestic. Majestic. They might be dazzling. That's a nice word. What else could I say they are? Oh, they almost look... well, we could even say they're quite small. Now, you can probably think of a better word than small. We could go to tiny. Minuscule. What else could we do? Well, if we're looking at them, I could say that they look quite serious. I mean, look at their faces. Okay, so we're now going to take the subordinate clause we were looking at, and we were looking at them in general, and we're now going to apply it to the sprites. So here's a sentence that we could use to describe one of the sprites. Dazzling in colour and about the size of large insects, sprites have glistening membranous wings. Where's the subordinate clause in that sentence, and how do you know it's a subordinate clause? Think about how we knew all of the other subordinate clauses were. Okay, so pause the video. Which part of that sentence is the subordinate clause? Is it before the comma or after the comma? Okay, so if we have a look here, we've got dazzling colour and about the size of large insects. That part there is the subordinate clause. How do we know? Well, because it doesn't make sense on its own. Dazzling in colour and about the size of large insects. Yes, that doesn't finish. There's no finish to that thought. Sprites have glistening membranous wings. That makes perfect sense on its own. That's great. You may be thinking, Mr. Kent, what on earth is membranous? Well, you can go and have a look it up, but basically it comes from the word membrane, and it just means really thin. Okay, really thin wings. Okay. We've got glistening in there. That's a powerful adjective that creates an image in your head. When you think of something glistening, what image do you have in your head? Is glistening a better word than sparkly? Well, yes, because glistening, to me, makes me think of water. It makes me think of the sun hitting off the water, and I think that's a much better description. Dazzling. What does the word dazzling make you think of? When is something considered dazzling? Well, the word dazzling, if we're thinking about dazzling, when would you use it? What dazzles? Well, again, we could have the sun. We could have glass. Maybe jewellery. It's much better than what we could have had, which was sparkly. So when you're doing your descriptions in a second, I'd like you to think about the words you're using quite carefully and see if you can pick and up-level your vocabulary. Here's another one. Serious in expression and with a frown on its face, the head is significantly smaller than the body. Now, what have I done? Now, this is the important bit. This is where you need to listen, because this is what you're going to do for your activity. So, tune in. Serious in expression and with a frown on its face, the head is significantly smaller than the body. Which part of that is the subordinate clause? Well, the first part is the subordinate clause, because it doesn't make sense on its own. But what have I done? Well, I've taken a body part, the head, Then I've focused on it in detail. So instead of just saying about the head, I've said serious in expression with a frown on its face. First, I've described a part of it, the face, and then zoomed back out to describe the whole body part. Let me show you what that looks like. So here's my creature here, and this is what I'd like you to do in a second. So the first thing we need to do is we need to take one of the body parts. So I am going to focus on the arms. Now, what did I say I need to do next? I describe a part of it, and then I zoom back out. So I need a bit at the beginning of the sentence. So, describing the arms. Let's focus on a detail about the arms. I'm going to focus on the spikes. So, I could have something like, with spikes along the top, then what do I need to do? I then need to go back out, zoom out, and describe the whole body part. So, with spikes along the top, comma, the arms are deadly. There we go, something like that. Now, I need to check, have I got a subordinate clause in there? Well, with spikes along the top, that doesn't make sense on its own, so it is a subordinate clause. The arms are deadly. Is that a main clause? Yes, because it makes sense on its own. I'm going to let you have a go now. I'm going to start you off. So, I am next going to focus on the ears, the ear bit here. Now, the first thing I need to do is pick a detail on the ears. So, what could I describe about the ears? Well, I could describe the sort of flowery top to them. So, I'm going to start with a flower at the top. See if you can end that. So with a flower at the top, the ears are something. Okay, so with a flower at the top, the ears are known for excellent hearing. So let's just have a little look at our success criteria before I set you off on your task. So when we're writing a sentence that has a subordinate clause in it, for today what I'm asking you to do is to start with the subordinate clause, and it's basically a fronted adverbial. So what you're going to do, step 1, let me make a note of this somewhere. Step 1, pick a body part. Step 2, describe a detail of it. So pick a detail and describe it. And you can start with the word with. Describe a detail. Part 3, zoom out and describe the whole body part like I did here. What do we have to have? What's our success criteria? So, success criteria. Subordinate clause followed by a comma followed by a main clause. Might help put an E on the end rather than Santa Claus. Subordinate clause, comma, main clause. That's your success criteria. Subordinate clause has to not make sense on its own, and that's what we'll be looking for when you upload it to Seesaw. So what is your task for today? Well, on Seesaw, I'm going to upload the image of all of the sprites that you saw earlier. Now I'm going to ask you to choose 3 of those sprites, any 3, and you're going to write a sentence for each that describes something about them, and it must contain a subordinate clause. So, you could, let me go back to it, you could pick any of these. So I could pick this one here, and the first thing I'm going to do is, right, I'm going to pick this creature, and I'm going to write my first sentence. So my first sentence, I'm going to pick this one, and I'm going to describe his hat, or his helmet. I'm going to say it's got a helmet. Don't know why, but he has. So, I've done that. So in my first sentence, I'm describing the helmet of this creature. So, think about my success criteria. I'm going to start with my subordinate clause. With a bent top, comma, success criteria. Going to zoom back out with a bent top. The helmet looks nearly useless. There we go, sentence done. So I've done my first sprite, now I'm going to pick another sprite and do a sentence about them. Okay, that's your main task for today. The images will be on Seesaw. I'll leave you a bit of room to write your sentences on there as well. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.